Hi, Christina, Harold, Nick. It's great to have you here. How are you all?
All good. How are you?
Hi.
Great, Rebecca. Nice to see you.
Yeah, and
Very
you.
nice being here.
Oh, it's lovely to see you. And this is a really great topic. I'm so excited about doing this podcast because the whole world is talking about this. And clearly we are the authorities because we are clear on the whole topic because we're recording this. So I'm really interested to hear what you're going to say. And I think everybody else will as well. So we're talking about the tariffs that Trump has introduced over the recent weeks and where we're going with them and how it's affecting business. So Harold, how are these new tariffs affecting business, and which industries do you think are being hit the hardest?
Well, certainly anyone that was doing business in China in any meaningful way has been significantly hampered by all of this. With tariffs in excess of 145%, business really in many respects is ground to a standstill. To the extent that there are any of a number of businesses in Canada and in Europe that were doing business in the United States at a duty-free level, while 10% is not necessarily a major impediment to doing business, business structures had to be modified in those countries to deal with the fact that all of a sudden tariffs were becoming due. Steel has been impacted, automobiles have been impacted. Anything involving steel and aluminum have run into a 25% tariff with a calculation that's really quite complicated in terms of what the value of that content is in a product. So overall, it's been a as the Chinese say, may you live in interesting times. These have been interesting times.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, you can't avoid hearing about this all the time at the moment on the news. So, Christina, how are companies responding to this? And in your view, what's the initial steps that businesses should take to be sensible in terms of dealing with it, rather than sort of be chicken, sort of chicken run running around panicking? What are your views on that?
Yeah, I think the initial response was panic. There was a panic set, but now with the 90-day pause, I think all the companies have been able to sort of pause the panic, take a step back, and they're looking for alternatives. They're looking for ways where they can avoid being blindsided. So a lot of companies have turned to either customs and duties experts or international tax experts, and both, to be able to sort of plan this out, work on models, and see in what ways they can minimize the effects of tariffs in their existing structure.
So there must be some quite interesting ways that you can avoid the tariffs. I say avoid, I mean not pay everything, sort of try and get around it. I'm trying to think of my words very carefully here, guys. So, Nick, rather than just sort of paying up front, if companies want to sort of reduce the tariff burden, that's a better way of saying it, isn't it? How would they go about it? Are there sort of other things they can do that are sort of more expensive ways of tackling?
Absolutely. To layer into and weave into the conversation that Christina and Harold were just providing their comments on, there are more there are a few ways that companies are reconsidering how they're doing business, and in doing so, they're needing to reconsider what type of operational changes would have to happen. So one of the ways is that companies are trying to navigate through this tariff maze is to look at supply chain restructuring. That would probably be one of their first knee-jerk reactions, and just start sourcing from countries that, if you're sourcing from China, you can try to reroute or start procuring from other countries with a lower duty rate. That's one way to start thinking this through. The other way would be to modify your operating model. So if you're a multinational and you have a distribution entity in the United States that imports and resells goods, and now the companies are thinking, well, in order to be able to pay less, does that distributor become more of a limited risk type of entity where they're able to earn less and therefore pay less and thereby trying to reduce the value of goods imported for duties. Now, having said that, these changes require the organization to really make real changes on how they're doing business. So if you had people in China sourcing and sending and shipping over to the US, now you want to start sourcing from another country. If those supply chains didn't exist, you can see how big of a lift that would be to change the whole supply chain and the pricing and the arrangements and the contracts that would be needed within an organization. Modifying your operating model is not easy either, because you'd need to consider whether there would be any exit charges from being one type of entity into another type of entity under transfer pricing rules. So these changes, though they may work and allow companies to be more adaptable in the future, given where the world seems to be heading with protectionism, still require the company to really think through the operational changes and in order to implement those changes. So those are the other ways that companies are starting to think this through.
I mean, those are really big changes. I mean, there's a big cost.
Yes.
There's a lot of planning involved in those. You've got to look at, I suppose you'd have to look at the cost versus what you would save.
Exactly. Investments that are going to be needed, right? Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Harold, do you think there are sort of slightly smaller practical strategies that people can use to mitigate the impact of these tariffs?
Well,
This
has become the world we live in today, and the starting point is the notion that customs duties aren't fixed, they're variable. And the underlying premise in many situations is that customs looks to assess duty based on the intrinsic value of manufacturing an article. So where you have multiple levels of sale between, for example, a factory and a trading company or distribution company to the importer, there are rules in the United States that would permit something called first sale and allow for the price from the manufacturer to be the price for duty purposes rather than the price from the trading company, which oftentimes has a gross margin of 15 or 20%. Under the same logic, many companies developed a structure for selling into the United States, wherein they not only manufactured goods, but they also had a whole host of ancillary functions, which ordinarily would not be considered dutiable. However, under the customs rules, if you pay an amount of money to a seller, the entire amount is dutiable, irrespective of whether the underlying costs might not be. So it involves restructuring those companies to eliminate the non-dutiable functions into separate entities, which can result again in significant duty value reductions. Many companies are looking to multi-country production, where if you effect a substantial transformation in a second country, you can avoid China, or generally it's China because the duty rates are so high. You can avoid China rates and go to a singular 10% rate, which is far more advantageous. There's no one size fits all kind of answer, but by understanding how a company does business, there are oftentimes ways to at least mitigate the impact of some of these tariffs. Companies are today planning for the future being 30, 60, 90 days from now, when 145% becomes closer to 50, and preparing for how to do business in that environment.
So it's really about being agile, isn't it? And sort of thinking through, like you can't just sit there, can you, today? I mean, COVID taught us about agility, and I think it's even more relevant, isn't it?
You know, right now, in many situations, you're playing you bet your business, and finding the right solutions, at least to mitigate the effects of all of this, becomes critical to some businesses.
So, I mean, everything's become such a sort of global topic of conversation, hasn't it? So, Christina, if we look at the bigger picture, how are these tariff challenges affecting the broader sort of economic environment that we're living within?
Yeah, I think with the change of presidency, initially there was an optimism in a big economic bloom, as President Trump was promising lower tax rates for companies and other ways in which business would do better and thrive. But I think, however, based on these tariffs and everything that went on, all these, I think, optimism has turned into uncertainty and a little bit of a disappointment. And we are currently expecting to get a new tax bill around July 4th, and that's assuming all parties come into an agreement. And hopefully that tax bill will have some measures that will allow businesses in the US to have lower taxes, higher benefits. But I think that's also getting a little murky because the 90-day pause also ends around that time. So I think any major economic benefits will be overshadowed. I would say still companies can look into minimize their US tax base by taking benefits from other tax credits, other deductions, in other ways where they can maximize the deductions available to them. But regardless, I think there's an outweigh with everything else that's going on.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are all right at the coalface in terms of dealing with these problems with businesses and advising them. So Nick, what are you actually seeing in terms of your clients coming in and going, help me? Well, what are they saying? What are they doing? What action are they taking? So.
No, these are all great. What we're seeing is a testament to what Harold and Christina and I have been talking about today. In the modeling, we see our clients looking at reduced volumes of sales, potentially pricing pressures from retailers in, for example, consumer products. And we're looking at reduced volumes in terms of just units being sold. And then increased costs because of the necessity to review and revisit all the supply chain. And so how that translates into some real live examples is Christina and I have a client from Spain that sells furniture, and they were planning a significant expansion into the United States. And based on a few conversations with them and based on even the 10% duty rate that Harold referred to in terms of a country that may not have the 145% rate that they're trying to apply on China, you see this company now halting its expansion into the United States, where before they were setting up warehousing, getting their supply chain in order and the distribution channels in order in the United States, they put a full pause on it and they're revisiting what their operating model will be and revisiting when they may come back into and expand into the United States. So that's impacting economic expansion within the United States, but also globally, right? You see the reduction of business happening. Another example would be a reduction in capital expenditures on heavy machinery for manufacturing companies, because buying those machines are generally made outside of the United States. The modeling starts to show that their original forecasts and profitability are not going to achieve those types of levels. And with the uncertainty in the tariff regime, they're just not sure when to start buying those or having those products, if they did buy them already and there's some in some warehouse, when to bring them over. So these are like real live examples of what we're seeing in our client base. The other thing, Rebecca, I think we shouldn't forget is that this isn't a one-way street, right? So we have the issues in the United States with Trump and uncertainty. But if you think about U.S. multinationals that want to expand into foreign markets, see the opportunities to expand in foreign markets with the retaliatory aspect of these tariffs and how other countries are reacting to the United States, that also drives down the economic growth. So we see recently in Canada that they have stopped receiving. So in Canada, the liquor is sold in the provinces under the liquor control. They control the importation and sale of liquor in Canada. And so with one stroke, they've been able to just put a pause and stop allowing the importation into Canada of, for example, Kentucky bourbon. And that market is big for companies in that area of the country. And so you start to see the reduction globally of how this could really hurt things from an economic expansion standpoint. So that's really what we're seeing, and our clients are actually experiencing in looking for help from us.
Now there's a few things that are really interesting in what you've said, and I mean this whole idea of it's the sort of knock on internationally in terms of what's going on. So Harold, I mean the easy thing is to think we're heading for a crisis, and the papers, the journalists, you know, they do like to egg it up as well. Do you think that we are heading for a crisis, or do you think companies will manage their way through this and we're going to reach some sort of balance in time over the next couple of months?
You know, I think that anyone who tells you they know or can foresee with reasonable accuracy what's coming, well, I wouldn't buy any real estate from them.
But I thought you guys had the crystal ball. I mean,
you know, the best we can do is speculate. And there are enough signs that I see, both in terms of what you see in the press and what I hear from overseas, that there will be a set of resolutions in 30, 60, 90 days that will encompass many of the issues. And I think if we segregate for a moment China and the rest of the world, you know, there are major trading partners outside of China with the US. There's the EU, there's Great Britain, there's India, Japan, and I believe those countries will get resolved. And quite frankly, a 10%, assuming that that is a number, if it's not something less than that, will get absorbed into the economy with a relative degree of simplicity. What'll be more difficult and is steel and aluminum and cars, and we haven't. It's not clear how that's going to resolve itself, but that will add some incremental cost to a lot of different things. China is the bigger issue, but I will tell you that prior to Independence Day, if you will, people were managing with a 50%, 50+% tariff out of China, and business was going along rather successfully. Manufacturers were sharing part of the problem, and the importers were taking some part of the margin. The consumer was taking some portion of it, and under certain situations where we were able to structure an importer's transactions, Uncle Sam picked up part of it. When you're thinking about a gross margin, for example, of a trading company at 20%, if there's a 50% tariff, 10% of that can be reduced by using a first sale structure to do business, and that's a 10% reduction in the overall tariffs. So there are a lot of different answers to all of this. I think companies are generally prone to finding ways to survive and succeed, and I think that's exactly what's happening here. When the 145% changes, I think that there will be a far greater level of stability that returns.
I very much hope that that's true, that we do return to some stability.
Well, don't we all?
But I think the thing that really strikes me is just listening to you is how many pieces there are to this. It's a really complex issue, and for businesses with all their different workings and machinations to have to deal with all these different other complex pieces around them and trying to come up with a solution. So I'm really glad I don't do your jobs at the moment.
Well, so, I must tell you, I've been practicing law for a little more than 50 years, all in this area.
40.
Pardon?
I thought you were 40, Harold.
I only feel like 40. But the truth of the matter is that I've never seen any circumstance which is more complicated than this. And I mean, as a practitioner, it's interesting and exciting. And I think there are, for many companies today, there are real options, and they just need to figure out what they are.
Yeah. So Christina, I mean, you said to me the other day that you thought it was almost like solving a Rubik's Cube, if people remember those. It's I mean, there's so many connected elements. You kind of have to see where different bits are going to work out how to solve the puzzle.
Yeah,
You know, how should businesses deal with that sort of
right.
interconnectedness of problems in terms of the way that they deal with their response?
Right. So for example, if you have a standalone American company that is importing from a third-party manufacturer, I think your current options are increase your price or diversify your providers to minimize the tariffs that are being imposed. But if you're dealing with a multinational company that has the manufacturing subsidiary in one country, the distributing company in a different country, the management company in a different country, then now you're really dealing with a puzzle that has like a lot of moving parts. Because let's say that you're able to adjust the pricing of the product that is being imported by the manufacturing subsidiary to another related party. You could avoid tariffs there, but at that point you need to consider, are you running into a foul with transfer pricing legislation and rules? Are you leaving the correct profit in the correct jurisdiction based on the function that that company is supposed to play within the multinational structure? Are you considering the income tax rates that are applying in each of the jurisdictions? Because what if the country in which the manufacturing is being done has a lower tax rate than the country which is the distributor, but now you're shifting the profit to the distributor company country, and you might end up in a overall worldwide higher effective tax rate while you're minimizing your tariffs, and that's not a good answer for anybody. So I think when you're dealing with these multinational companies, you really need to have a holistic vision and have a thorough calculation and modeling that will plan out and include all the different factors and give you different alternatives that companies can play with.
Yeah, it's just, I'm so glad I'm not having to deal with this myself, or at least my business doesn't get affected by it. It's so complicated. But just going back to Nick, because he half made a confession earlier that we have to expose this, I'm afraid, that you are actually
Sure.
you are Canadian,
Yes.
despite working in the US. So I'm going to come to you to talk about Canada's relationship with the US, because I think you're probably the best person here to discuss this. So how do you think the tariffs are affecting the relationship in reality? I mean, you get the stuff on the news, it's all show, but
Sure.
what do you think the reality actually is?
I think the reality, given that the Prime Minister of Canada, Carney, met with Donald Trump yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was pretty attuned to what was going on. I think, as I've always characterized the relationship, there's two relationships, right? There's this political Washington-Ottawa relationship, and then there's the people, right? The people in Canada and the people in the United States. And I think from all accounts that you see in the news, that the people are understanding that there are some political opportunities, goals that Trump may want to achieve in terms of developing a tax bill or balancing budgets or whatever. But the other reality is that, the people recognize that the two economies are fully integrated. You can't start splitting it up, especially when it comes to cars, when it comes to agricultural products like potash that the United States needs desperately, that the farmers need desperately. So I think the people are seeing through that, and they're looking at the politicians. And I think we described it yesterday as like political theater, right? They're these kids that are playing, and Trump is saying, I don't need Canada. I'm going to make Canada the 51st state. And you have a Canadian prime minister who's trying to show the people back in Canada that, no, we're not for sale. And there's a relationship here that we can build, and an economic opportunity that we can build. So I think that it's like, who's going to blink first? I think both countries recognize that they both need each other because the economies are so integrated. And I think it's going to be like, how at the end, how can we resolve the steel issues that Harold spoke about earlier? How can we resolve the car issues in terms of how cars are made and parts going back and forth daily to make a car? And how does the Prime Minister of Canada look like he stood up for Canada? And how does Trump look and ensure that he played the strong man and got Canada to capitulate? And I think that's the tension within the governments. But I think the people are starting now to see through and understand that, they want these actors to get on with it because it is hurting both economies. And yesterday we spoke, and I have to say it again, the reason I'm so confident that I think the people of each country really understand is if you watch a hockey game and you have the Toronto Maple Leafs playing one of the American teams, the Florida Panthers, and during the national anthems, the Canadians do not boo the U.S. national anthem when they play in Canada. And that says a lot because I think the people understand that, they just want the guys in Washington and Ottawa to get on with it, because if this continues, both countries lose out. The people of both countries lose out.
Yeah, I know at the end of the day, all the politics just hits the people, doesn't it?
Just hits the people. That's right.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Bottom line. So I was sort of doing my accounts yesterday. It was something that I often enjoy doing. Not it's one of those unfortunate things you have to do because I've got a big corporation tax bill coming up at the beginning of next month, which made me think about this whole situation. And I was wondering how do duties sort of interplay with your taxes for your business? How does that pan out?
Well, I think as both Christina and Nick were talking about before, multinationals have to deal with a complex formula of taxes and duties. And the moves you make in country A affect what happens in country B, C, and D. I've always believed that you have to understand that once you pay duties, they're gone. There's no tax carry forward, no carry back, no depreciation that can get thrown into the mix. So, we've always in dealing with our tax professionals at firms, we've always cautioned that once you pay the duties, they're gone. So you need to think about the tax structure, and even if the impact may not be completely favorable, is there a way that somewhere down the road you can correct it? Because once you've paid the duties, they're gone, irrespective of what happens within the business.
So it's the kind of thing that you really need help with planning, isn't it? Otherwise, you could find yourself paying far too much on every front, couldn't you?
Well, I think, when companies are in the hands of qualified professionals, at the end of the day, you can get the best answers possible. And you've heard Christina and Nick talking about multinationals and all of the issues they have to deal with, and that becomes part of your day-to-day existence in those companies. So I think that I think companies that are well represented generally do well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, question to finish off to all of you. What would be your best single piece of advice for a business dealing with this? They get up in the morning, what's the one thing they absolutely have to do? Do you want to kick off, Christina?
Sure, absolutely. I only believe that behind every challenge, there are potential opportunities. So I think multinational companies should take this chance to review their current structure, their current supply chain, and their current transfer pricing models. I think it's a great time to do that. And as Harold mentioned before, there is no solution that will be a one-size-fits-all. But with the advice of experienced professionals and with proper planning, I think multinational companies should be able to minimize disruption and optimize the performance during this trade uncertainty.
That's great. So, Harold, your tip?
I think what I would really say to folks is that tariffs are not a fixed cost. They are variable with proper examination, study, and structuring. And I think that folks who are sitting around today without trying to find solutions are probably making a mistake. And lastly, to the extent that there are changes you make to save duties, they become savings that are the gift that keep giving. And the savings may continue for years and years to come, even after some of this tariff hullabaloo has passed.
Oh, that's a great point. I like that. Like that very much. So, Nick, to finish off,
Yes.
last one, what's your piece?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think my comment is kind of synthesizing what Harold, the good advice that Harold and Christina just gave. And I think going to the sort of that micro level of what is going on in multinationals or companies that are importing into the United States and are facing these tariffs, but not only in the United States, but globally potentially, is that they need to continue modeling out the potential impacts and keeping abreast of what's going on with the tariffs. And not only having finance or treasury or someone in those groups just do the modeling and speak to the C-suite, right? We need people at the table. They need people at the table to give them sort of that holistic picture. And that's where I think people like Harold should be at the table. People like Christina on international tax issues should be at the table reviewing that information. And people like myself in transfer pricing need to be giving the advice of the potential implications of what they're seeing on the modeling. So it's not done in a vacuum, that you really get a holistic view of what the models are saying, and then looking for those opportunities that Christina talked about and the opportunities that Harold is talking about, because I think that's the way business can really go forward and achieve the goals of being agile and facing the challenges that we spoke about before.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, all of you. It's been really interesting today. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you about this, and I'm sure that anybody listening will have enjoyed it as much as I did. If people want to get hold of you, you can get hold of you through the Nexia website if they need to. But I just want to thank you for your time today, and I'm sure everybody's really appreciated it. So
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having
Thanks a
us.
lot, guys.
The opportunity,
Especially for the 40 comment.
See, it was worth coming on just for that alone, wasn't it? It's all right. You can give me the $10 later. It's fine.
There you go.
See you guys. Bye.